Parents? Oh, that's your job. That's specified. Well, it's not specified. It's an unwritten rule that I made up that you seem to have followed up until now.
I don't follow any of that. But you know what? I'm going to go ahead and give a shout out here to Gary Paulson, who recently passed away. He was the author of Hatchet, which pretty much every kid in like 3rd to 5th grade seemed to have read. I faked my book report, and it was still a great book because I ended up reading it later. It is a fantastic book. And you know what? Some of his other stuff is really good too. Mr. Tuckett. It was a Tuckett or Tucker. But either way, that was like a cowboy novel. That was a good one. Transall Saga. I mean, he recently passed away.
So we're going to do an episode on him or what?
Someday.
Okay.
He did a lot of naturalist writings about bears and stuff because I think he grew up around like the Alaskan wilderness kind of thing. And my 4th grade teacher and the 5th grade teacher that was next to his classroom, they were hunting buddies, and they would often fly out into the Alaskan wilderness and hunt just whatever's out there, Alaskans. And and Gary Paulson would write books about like people who survived bear attacks, and he would read that to us 4th graders during story time about how like a bear couldn't grab onto this photographer lady's head well enough, so when it bit down it scalped her instead of crushing her skull, and she was running with fucking blood like
Yeah.
that was terrific to hear as a child. Yeah.
I wonder if I feel like it's probably just because we're not in the school system now, but I feel like we might have been the last wave of supremely fucked up teachers. Because when I look over at teachers now when I'm passing by schools, I'm like, those look like normal, not insane war veterans and hunters and shit.
They're going to do weird shit regardless because they're still teachers. But I mean, like, before us, there was always like, yeah, it's a good thing teachers aren't pulling their pants down and spanking them in front of kids anymore.
Nobody thought that was like too low of a bar. Like, well, they're not assaulting them.
Right. Like, it's not sex abuse or anything like that. They're just pulling down a child's pants and spanking them raw. That's fine. So, yeah, there's always going to be something there. Like,
yeah. I mean, for fuck's sake, when I was in Atlanta as a kid, like this, right before me and my family moved up here, the district I was going to school in like lost accreditation. Like it was that bad.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And that was where?
I lived in Allenwood, Georgia. Yeah.
Okay, I thought if this was Miami or something, I was like, wow, that's a big deal. But no, this was the South.
Atlanta is not in Miami.
Yeah, correct. That who would have guessed that Woodland Shack would have ever lost accreditation? I had a very warm kennel as a child.
The dogs didn't.
Good. Evil. Let's stay on track. Also, might as well throw it out at the top rather than at the end, because why not? Mm-hmm. It's not gonna break your dick to subscribe to whatever. You just hit the alert thing. I don't know what it does, but from what I hear, Spotify tracks that shit, or whatever else tracks that shit. Apple, I don't know what. But we don't know what we're doing. Help us out here.
For the last time, they're going to subscribe. They're going to subscribe. I've never subscribed to any video or any podcast because someone has asked me to. If I enjoy it and I would like to be notified, then I click the fucking button that I know does that. Don't be that person.
I know. You know, and I'm the same way. I've never once done it. And I'm like, well, maybe it does work for them.
Not like, well, he seems like a really nice guy.
Because I'm not like other girls. Well, let's get started, shall we?
Yeah. You okay? You going to explode? There's a little bit too much pressure there from all your chicken nuggies?
It wasn't the nuggies.
It wasn't the
cider is very just, it's bubbly.
Yeah, it's great. All right.
Ralph Waldo Ellison was born March 1st, 1913 in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, to Lewis and Ida Ellison. He was named after famous philosopher and abolitionist Ralph Waldo Emerson. He had two brothers, Alfred, who died in infancy before Ralph was born, and his younger brother Herbert, born 3 years after him in 1916. Ralph's father Lewis was a business owner, delivering coal and ice to different establishments. Well, one day he was loading a 100-pound block of ice into a container above his head when all of a sudden it dropped, in front of Lewis, the ice exploding like shrapnel. And Ralph was there to witness the whole thing. Lewis's wounds were cut too deep to save him, especially the chunk that cut into his stomach, and he later succumbed to his wounds. While he was alive, he was an avid book reader, and it was his far-fetched dream that Ralph would grow up to be a poet. 5 years later, in 1921, Ralph's mother, Ida, moved herself and her 2 boys to Gary, Indiana, where her brother lived, hoping to find a job in the North to give her kids a better chance at survival. Because, you see, while the Civil War had been over for quite some time, the racial tension wasn't. And the Ellison family was black. Now, while Ida had trouble finding work in Indiana, everything would be fine so long as her brother didn't lose his job. Well, her brother lost his job, so they had to move back to Oklahoma. I only recently found this out. I always thought Gary, Indiana was only known because it's just an armpit hub of, like, trucker stops and, like, killer scenes.
How's that different than, like, 60% of America, possibly more?
Pretty much. Yeah. Well, because they're more populated. But okay. Gary, Indiana isn't. I only recently found out that was like a central hub for a while. I don't know what changed. Maybe it's because it's in the Indiana. I don't know.
Don't flash the lights.
Now, Ralph's choices in career were a tad limited growing up. Shoe shiner, busboy, waiter. He went on to actually have a pretty good high school career attending Douglas High School. He found time to play on the football team, took up band after learning how to play the trumpet from a friend's father, and eventually became the bandmaster of his school, all while working to help keep his family afloat. But Ralph was a bit of an intellectual smartass, so while he was always butting heads with the principal, he was largely influenced by the principal's daughter, the music teacher. In fact, when Ralph graduated in 1931, he put a down payment on a trumpet to play with the local bands. Now, growing up in Oklahoma in the 30s as a black person, you could probably guess the negatives. It was Ralph's dream to get away. His goal was to get accepted to the Tuskegee Institute, an all-black college founded in Tuskegee, Alabama in 1881 by famous African-American leader Booker T. Washington himself.
Jordan, it is Tuskegee.
Thank you for verifying that.
Okay.
You had a look on your face that was like...
I was like, I don't...
That sounds like a place I know, but not quite.
I was like, that's not...
Well, this is what you get correct. For only reading the name, I guess. I should have looked it up, but...
I mean...
It's not going to be around for very long, luckily for me, because I'm not going to remember.
This is where you're at a disadvantage. If you're only reading and I'm only capable of learning through visual means and audio means, then I'll know how it's pronounced, you see.
You learn how to say it correctly through visual means?
Yeah.
Well, unfortunately, Ralph was not accepted to the Institute. But when they noticed they were actually down a trumpet player for their orchestra, they said, fuck it, welcome aboard. He did it. Ralph was finally free from his classist depression, only to find out it was just as bad at the Institute as anywhere else. Sure, there weren't a bunch of white people hanging around to disparage him. Instead, the class system became entirely dependent on wealth instead of color. So now the other black students were giving Ralph shit for being the poor boy from bumfuck Oklahoma. Ralph became scornful of his classmates. His 2 escapes were the music department and reading. He would go on to say that The Wasteland by T.S. Eliot was a huge awakening moment for him. This led to him getting a job as a desk clerk at the University Library in 1934.
We went over that guy, right?
T.S. Eliot?
Yeah.
No, but I've just brought him up a bunch of times because he was very influential to a bunch of people, but I haven't gotten to him quite yet. So when he became the desk clerk at the library, it caught the attention of both the librarian and his English teacher, who, for all intents and purposes, taught Ralph that literature can be an art form just as much as music. This led Ralph down a path of James Joyce and Fyodor Dostoevsky, who both had some pretty cynical views of the world around them, which, of course, Ralph instantly identified with. From the time he was accepted in 1933 to 1935, when Ralph was 22 years old, he dropped out of the Tuskegee Institute without a degree.
There we go.
Yeah, all right. That's not going to stay there for very long. He also dropped his passion for music and replaced it with writing, except for a time that he thought he wanted to be a sculptor for some reason. It didn't last very long, but it was because of his interest in sculpture that caused him to move to New York City that very next year to study the craft. Still attempting to find, quote-unquote, his people, not just black people, but black people that wouldn't treat him like dirt, Ralph moved to what was then the black capital of America, Harlem. I put that in quotation marks. Those aren't my words.
You gotta say that before you say it then. Jesus.
You know, the black capital of America. Well, unfortunately for Ralph,
this is a scary episode.
He had no job and therefore no lodgings, so he had to stay at his local YMCA. Now, 10 years earlier, in 1925, a revolution happened that was completely centered in Harlem. Alain Locke, a black philosopher and writer, released a collection of essays called The New Negro. The essays mainly focused on how the black community should not accept their place in a post-Civil War world that essentially still treated them like slaves, but rise up for their civil rights. For at least the middle and upper class black people. The other ones can just kind of, be denizens of the underworld if they want.
Wait, how do you know that?
Well, that's what he was saying in the book.
All right.
He was like, no, we have to show that we are just like the whites and how well-to-do they are and sophisticated, but it's not for all of us.
Oh.
Yeah. So that was where the book fell short. It wasn't saying every black person deserved equal rights, but aren't the sophisticated ones just as good? But regardless of its half-hearted message, the New Negro still kicked off a cultural revolution in New York City called the Harlem Renaissance. One of the main icons of leadership during this movement was one of the only people that wrote in Alain Locke's book about not excluding the lower classes. His name was Langston Hughes. You see, Langston Hughes was very proactive in the black community. His entire family was. Hell, his grandmother's first husband took part in John Brown's raid on Harper's Ferry, where around 25 abolitionists and former slaves attempted to take over a Confederate arsenal. I did look it up. They do sell shirts. Fuck yeah. Langston himself helped black productions get made, helped unions get organized, all the while preaching for the equal rights of all black people, not just the ones in the upper and middle classes. In 1934, at the age of 33, Langston Hughes released a short story collection produced by Knopf Inc. called The Ways of White Folks, where each story basically had the moral that white people are too set in their ways to think of black people as anything more than a lesser race, as long as the black people are set to act that way. It had been 70 years since the Civil War ended. There were plenty of people who remembered
just like,
it.
No. You're just acting too black.
Yeah.
Was that it?
Yeah, kind of. He was like, basically the first guy was like, well, there are some in our class structure that are better than the other black guys, if you know what I mean. And he's like, no.
I'm not like the other black guys.
Yeah, basically. And then Langston Hughes comes in and he's like, no, we're not like that. We're all worthy. So long as we can prove it by acting a bit whiter as a collective,
That's okay.
Right. Yeah, no, they're getting there. So there were plenty of people who remembered the Civil War and passed their shitty views down to their kids. According to Langston Hughes, it was up to the black community to show the rest of the country that they're just as human and worthy of rights as anyone else. Now, Langston Hughes was a bit of an anomaly to Ralph Ellison. Not only was Langston Hughes brave enough to publish his views as a black man and still be brave enough to walk around in broad daylight, but he was an actual black author making a living just from his own writings alone. And Ralph wanted the same. I actually, if you look up the book cover, The Way of White Folks, as well, it is big fucking type. It is there to make anybody who's walking by it be like, oh, that's a problematic book. That's exactly what it's there for. It's for people to be shocked because Langston Hughes, we're not going to go into him too much here, more than his relationship with Ralph Ellison. But Langston Hughes was a huge community figure and he was fucking brave as shit. He was all up into people's faces. Somehow And I could not figure out how Hughes and Ellison met. Couldn't find anything about it. But Hughes was glad to show Ellison the main players of the Harlem Renaissance, one of which was an author by the name of Richard Wright, who would later release the controversial Native Son in 1940. But right now in 1934, Richard Wright was a bit of a small-time writer, mostly publishing his Marxist poetry in a communist magazine printed in New York called New Masses. He had even started his own literary circle that year called the South Side Writers Group, and he wanted Ralph to join.
Oh, so he had a fun time then, I'm sure.
Who?
The black communist.
But here's the thing is, like, up until, at the very least, like, so communism definitely, like, got its ground roots before World War II and after, like, between the two world wars. And it didn't really become such a controversial viewpoint until, like, the McCarthyism of the 50s and stuff, when they started doing witch hunts and shit. I mean, what's his name? Osamu Dazai, around the same time, doing the same thing. Communism was going all around the world as just an idea for people to, and that's the thing. It sounds great on paper.
Until the whole Red Scare thing happened, it's still left over in the Gen Xers a little bit.
What do you mean?
Nothing.
Where have you been the past night or two?
What are you talking about?
Did I not see you come out of a meeting?
I work 60 hours a week in this capitalist hellhole. I only wear blue. I don't have time to produce communist agenda, like propaganda.
I only wear blue. It is my favorite color. If there's any red, there better be white and blue in there too, sir. God damn it! All right, now
perhaps an editing point there.
So
17 minutes, 4 seconds.
Now, at first, Ralph was just writing book reviews for Richard Wright as a way to make money, which he's doing a review for Marxist Works, and the review is getting published in New Masses, which is a Marxist magazine, so I have to assume the reviews were all favorable. Plus, the author is his buddy, so... I mean, Ralph Ellison was even Richard Wright's best man when he got married in 1939. But either way, just from his reviews alone, Richard Wright saw something in Ralph Ellison's prose. So he convinced him to try his hand at writing fiction. And Ralph did. Somewhat sporadically, he would publish some 20-odd stories, reviews, and articles between 1933 and 1944, which is like 2 or 3 pieces a year. Pretty slow going. But during these years, in 1938, Ralph met a stage actress named Rosa Araminta Poindexter. Well, he was about 25 years old, and she would be about 27. They married that very same year. However,
the older.
Huh?
Nothing.
Yeah, no, I agree. I would hope. Nicole's listening to this right now, like, fucking better. However, the marriage wasn't without its rocks. In 1941, Ralph had an affair with fellow communist writer Sonora Babb. But it's okay, because he was honest and told his wife Rosa about it.
It's less of a rock and more of a fucking affair.
No, it's cuter when it's a metaphor.
It's cuter when you call it an affair.
Oh, and by the way, quick side note here, but Sonora Babb was collecting first-hand stories from farmers during the Dust Bowl around this time, and her fucking supervisor at her job lent her notes to John Steinbeck, who used her notes to write The Grapes of Wrath and win the Pulitzer Prize for Fiction in 1939. But Sonora boldly still wrote her own story and handed it over to her publishers for publication.
She got paid, right?
Well, they promptly shelved the novel, saying, "Don't worry, we'll publish it later. We just don't want The Grapes of Wrath to flood the market and overshadow your book." Sonora Babb's...
Okay, I trust you guys.
The novel wouldn't be released until 2004.
Ooh!
That's a hell of a wait. But the book is called Whose Names Are Unknown, and apparently it is fucking great, so go check it out. Anyway, even though Ralph was super candid about his cheating, Rosa just didn't see it that way, and for some reason, divorced Ralph in 1943 after 5 years of
Honesty
marriage.
is not that much of a virtue.
Babe, come on!
I told you! Does that mean anything to you? At least you know what I'm doing.
I didn't need you to describe the swing, though. Now, if you asked Ralph Ellison if he was communist, he'd say yes. He wasn't exactly hiding it. I mean, all of his work thus far had been printed in New Masses, which is pretty openly communist magazine. However, Ralph wasn't exactly advertising that fact either. I think he liked the ideas behind the movement, but wasn't too into the fan base, you know? It's kind of like how I don't mention that I like Steven Universe in public because the fans are notoriously evil people.
Wait, how big of a writer is this guy? Is this more of an obscure writer or no?
Oh, no. No.
Okay. I just feel like this hasn't been brought up before, and I've had plenty of people dismiss me and say I need to read more books before I can have conversations about this with him. And they haven't mentioned the black guy once, which I find weird.
Why do you feel that it was important to mention it?
If it was influential?
Actually, yeah, it 100% was.
Okay, yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, it's kind of fucking weird.
If his color literally did not matter in this, I can't imagine a reason I would bring it up. But his one important work, which we will get into, it had a huge influence in the civil rights movement. It was extremely influential. It was like how Harriet Beecher Stowe wrote Uncle Tom's Cabin, and that book kicked off Civil War.
Harriet Beecher Stowe. Yep.
Her heart was in the right place.
I know all about it, and I agree with you 100%.
Whatever. During World War II, the Communist Party in America had become largely aware of its image and tried to make it cool to be communist. How would they do that? By forgetting its fight against the class system that was...
By making it not capitalism.
Well, they basically forgot their fight against the class system that was and still is killing Americans and talk more about social reform instead. So instead of educating people through talks and pamphlets and hoping it might bring up a change in the community, the Communist Party in America essentially went straight to lobbying for politicians in Washington, as I understand it. So in a way, they were moving out of the lower class communities where they were making progress, although on a smaller scale, and focused only on the upper classes where they were the upper class again.
I'm familiar with the effects of this practice. Go on.
And what better way to appeal to the upper classes than to completely turn a blind eye to black people?
Oh, okay.
In a 1945 letter to Richard Wright, 3 days after the end of World War II, Ralph Ellison wrote, quote, "If they want to play ball with the bourgeois, they needn't think they can get away with it. Maybe we can smash the atom, but we can, with a few well-chosen, well-written words, smash all that crummy filth to hell." Now, although he was eligible for the draft during World War II, Ralph was luckily not enlisted. Instead, the year after the war ended, in 1946, Ralph enlisted in the Merchant Marines. Pissed with the way the Communist Party was turning its back on the whole of the black community, Ralph Ellison began writing down his thoughts on the matter as a way to make his aggression out. He began while on sick leave from the Merchant Marines in a barn in Waitsfield, Vermont. Soon his rantings became a short story, and then a novella. Eventually, he knew he was dealing with a full-blown novel. In 1946, Ralph married a woman named Fanny McConnell while he was 33 and she was 35. Again, with the 2-year gap. He's got a type.
I can relate to this.
Now, here's the thing. I won't go so far as to say Ralph used Fanny, but he certainly had a type. Pretty, sure, but most important to Ralph is not questioning Ralph. Oh. You see, he was a pretty well-read guy. He learned his prose from the works of T.S. Eliot, Hemingway, Faulkner. But to have some woman come in and say you misquoted something? No. So Fanny, a genius in her own right, a writer for the Chicago Defender and founder of the Negro People's Theater, as well as assisting in missionary work for the American Medical Center for Burma Frontiers, would come home after a day's work to type out Ralph's handwritten script for his novel. And yes, before you rant about it, Ralph was helping to make ends meet, but it was just through a handful of book reviews over the next several years for a quick paycheck here and there. For the most part, it was Fanny earning their income too. Well, on April 14th, 1952, after 7 years of work, Random House released Ralph Ellison's only novel, Invisible Man. Quote, I am an invisible man. No, I am not a spook like those who haunted Edgar Allan Poe, nor am I one of your Hollywood movie ectoplasms. I am a man of substance, of flesh and bone, fiber and liquids, and I might even be said to possess a mind. I am invisible, understand, simply because people refuse to see me. Like the bodiless heads you see sometimes in circus sideshows, it is as though I have been surrounded by mirrors of hard, distorting glass. When they approach me, they see only my surroundings, themselves, or figments of their imagination. Indeed, everything and anything except me. The nameless narrator of this story describes himself as invisible, though not from some superpower or affliction, but because, as a black man, society will walk by him without so much as a glance. He wishes to be noticed. Yet how much people ignore him makes him sometimes wonder if he himself exists. As a matter of fact, the narrator is squatting in the basement of a whites-only apartment building, where he has plugged in 1,369 light bulbs and is using them simultaneously. Not only is he so desperate to be noticed that he's put himself in the dangerous situation of being a black guy in a whites-only building, but he's also using so much electricity that he's just daring the power company to come discover him. Looming in the back of the narrator's mind is the memory of a framed photograph of his grandfather back at his family home. You see, the narrator's grandparents were freed slaves after the Civil War, and their whole lives, they always touted that they were, quote, separate but equal from white people. Well, on his deathbed, the grandfather tells his family, quote, after I'm gone, I want you to keep up the good fight. I never told you, but our life is a war, and I have been a traitor all my born days. A spy in the enemy's country ever since I give up my gun back in the Reconstruction. Live with your head in the lion's mouth. I want you to overcome them with yeses, undermine them with grins, agree them to death and destruction, let them swallow you till they vomit or bust wide open. Learn it to the young'uns. And since then, the narrator has always looked at this picture of his grandfather telling him, you're wrong. I am equal. And for years, the narrator believes himself the winner of their silent little argument. The narrator has been kind and courteous to everyone because why wouldn't you be? And eventually the white people in town start seeing the narrator as, quote, an example.
Oh, that's a bigger problem, isn't it?
Yeah, well, not to him. He's like, he carries that like a badge of honor. He's like, I am an example. Well, after high school,
no.
After high school, the narrator gets picked to give a speech in front of his whole graduating class. The speech is basically about how black and white people are and should remain separate but equal. And the speech is so well received that the school administrator invites him to give the speech in front of a social club that he's a part of. And of course, the narrator is just fucking pumped. The night he's to give his speech, the narrator goes through the back entrance of a building like he was instructed to, and lo and behold, there's 9 other black guys there in the kitchen. Before them is a buffet with beer and whiskey and tons of food. Once instructed, the 10 boys strip down, don their boxing gloves, and head into the elevator. And granted, none of these guys know what's happening, but already the other guys don't like the narrator, because apparently he replaced a good friend of theirs at the last minute for whatever this is.
This is the darkest prank imaginable.
But I fucking... Oh, man. It's... Yes.
Proceed.
So they get down to the ground floor or basement or whatever, and the doors open, and they've got these spotlights on them. And a clarinet begins to play, and there's this naked white woman dancing in the middle of the room. And behind the spotlight, these kids can hear a whole bunch of guys just jeering at them. Now they're not there long before all the lights come back on, and before them is a boxing ring. They hop inside and are instantly blindfolded. They're then told the winner of this battle royale will win $10. And all our narrator can think is, will I still get to deliver my speech? When the bell rings, the narrator is instantly beaten down, but the crowd tells him to get back on his feet. His sweat soaks the rag around his eyes, and through the fibers, he can now see like a little bit of the other boy's outlines, which gives him an edge. The narrator uses this to his advantage to beat on some of the other boxers before he sees men pull the rest out of the ring. They then remove his blindfold, where he sees it's just him and the biggest boxer left. Now, at first, he does one of those, like boxing hugs. He pulls the big guy in close and tells him to take the fall. He'll give him the money. He just wants to win so he can deliver his speech. And basically, the big guy tells him to go fuck himself and just starts wailing on him. Well, the narrator starts fighting back and is actually doing pretty well for himself. But then he hears one of the guys in the audience say, "I got my money on the big boy." And instantly the narrator starts thinking of his servitude. Should he throw the fight so this white guy doesn't get mad at him? If he loses, will he still get to deliver his speech? But before he can decide, he gets laid the fuck out. When the narrator comes to, the boys are ushered out in front of a rug, and the narrator thinks, hey, maybe this is where I'm going to give my speech. Instead, the crowd makes the boys get down on their knees and tells them not to touch the rug until they give the word. There's a smattering of coins, dollar bills, even some gold pieces on the rug. And all the white guys are standing around it like, hey, you guys earned this. You can keep whatever you grab. So they have the boys wait, and go. And of course, everyone goes for the gold pieces, but it turns out they're nailed to the rug. Also under the rug is a metal plate that's been wired with the electricity. So all the kids start convulsing as soon as they touch them, and they can't get up because they're all just laying on the gold pieces now. And of course, all the white guys think this is just a fucking laugh riot.
I feel like there's a metaphor here that is to be touched on by people more educated than us.
Yeah, we'll get to it.
Okay.
We'll get to all the themes of this and everything. But yeah, basically, I mean, while this is completely a work of fiction in some ways, I'll get to the ways in which it's not as well. Well, after a while, the white guys turn off the electricity and let them go clean up, where they're all given $5 and told to go on their way, except for the winner of the Battle Royale, who's given 10. By the way, the Battle Royale sounds like total fantasy, but this was a real thing that would happen. Cops would come by large crowds of white people with two black guys just bare-knuckle boxing in the middle, and cops would be like, you guys making them fight? And everyone would be like, no, this was their idea, right? The last Battle Royales weren't outlawed in the South until the 1960s.
Yeah.
So,
not a proud heritage.
Yeah, I was thinking of something to say like, you still liking Georgia?
Well, I still
I actually don't think you've ever liked it.
Well, no, let's not give me too much credit though. I can't afford to leave.
We have better gutters though, right?
No.
Oh, no. Fuck, really?
It's fucking fuck off. Proceed.
So please. All the kids are on their way out the building, and the narrator's just like, what about my speech? And school administrator's like, oh, right, okay, come on. So just beaten and sweaty, the narrator is giving his speech in front of all these white guys, and no one is paying any kind of fucking attention to him. Well, as the narrator is giving his speech, he keeps getting hung up on the words social responsibility. You know, black people have a social responsibility. But then he accidentally says, black people have social equality. And all of a sudden, the crowd is paying attention. They're like, fucking come again? After a little backpedaling on the narrator's part, he's able to finish his speech to uproarious applause. The narrator is given a leather briefcase as a prize before leaving, and inside is a scholarship for a black college. And when the narrator comes home, he looks at his grandfather's photograph and says, see that? Told you were wrong. They do treat me equal.
Got him.
And that night, all he dreams is just the sound of his grandfather's laughter. So the narrator goes to college, and of course a place like this couldn't exist without some white people backing it.
Oh, he's doing his life thing, huh?
Not Ralph Ellison himself. This is a pretty Russian way of telling like issues in society kind of thing, where it's like fantastical, but it's not super far-fetched. Mm-hmm. The narrator sees one of these white millionaires named Mr. Norton and wants to get on his good side, you know? Really show that he's of a higher ilk because rich white men like him. Well, Mr. Norton never really pays attention to the narrator whenever he's speaking, but that's okay. The narrator still earns the privilege of being Mr. Norton's driver at the end of the school year. Takes him wherever he wants to go. Well, on one particular day, Mr. Norton wants to ride by the old ramshackle homes behind the school property that used to be the old slave quarters. They're still occupied, but by poor black families now. The narrator pulls up to some of the houses.
It's different. It's totally different. It's totally different and better.
Hey,
Don't worry
now
about
they're working for almost no pay. The narrator pulls up to some of the houses, and he and Mr. Norton just kind of like watch some kids play like out in front while their father works. And the narrator tells Mr. Norton, "You don't want to be around these guys. There's rumors." And Mr. Norton is like, "What kind of rumors?" And the narrator tells him that supposedly the kids in the yard are a product of the dad working out front named Jim Trueblood and his own daughter. And for whatever reason, Mr. Norton cannot wrap his fucking mind around this. So he's like, I gotta go talk to this guy. And of course, Jim Trueblood sees a white guy coming up to him, so he just like drops what he's doing and sits down, waits for Mr. Norton to do whatever he's gonna do. So Mr. Norton starts interrogating Trueblood, like, is it true? Did you really bang your daughter? And Trueblood's like, yeah. Mr. Norton's like, why? And basically Trueblood tells him that like he and his daughter share a bed because they're so poor. And one night he had a dream that he was banging some chick not related to him, but when he woke up, it was his own daughter. So, whoops. I am shortening the story.
Could happen to anyone.
Yeah, I'm shortening the story by a lot of pages, by the way. It goes into some pretty graphic detail.
Yeah. Okay, good. Thank you.
I could have quoted more. You want me to go get it?
No.
Well, Mr.
Whoa. You have it printed? Why did you print it? What do you mean, go get it?
I have it printed?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was printed by, I think, a New York press.
No.
Put in book form.
No, you jackass in your script.
There.
Oh.
You printed it out? Why?
Shut up. That's only half of me. Don't do the accent.
Well, I'm not about to do a Puerto Rican accent.
Hey, man, I can't do one either. It's cool.
Well, Mr. Norton is so shocked by the story that he gives Trueblood a $100 bill to buy toys for the kids and goes back to the car. Because he feels bad that they have to live like their lives as products of incest. The narrator gets in. What, do you have something to add there?
No, I don't.
Okay. The narrator gets in, and Mr. Norton tells him that he feels faint and needs a glass of whiskey to calm his nerves. I've always heard this said in like old tales and shit. Like I don't need a nip of whiskey. It's always like, I need a glass. Please go get me a glass of whiskey. And it's like, whoa. Is it fucking 2 degrees outside or something? Goddamn, guy.
I don't know. Maybe they don't mean a literal glass. Like
it's always written that way though, and it's like. Actually, in this story,
we're both seasoned alcoholics, and an entire glass of whiskey will get us pretty tight.
And as I was like reading a different book, it was like, oh, I got to make sure that I'm looking like an alcoholic around here. So he like pours out a bunch of fifths and like puts them around his bed, and he was like, there, now I'm an alcoholic that's been here for 3 days. And I'm like, well, at least I don't do that,
Yeah,
I'm not that bad.
I feel like that would just mean back then, like they poured some whiskey in a glass and gave it to him. I don't mean like, I don't think it's like a mug shot, dude. Have you ever done a mug shot?
Of whiskey?
Of anything.
Mug shot?
A mug shot. A mug shot is literally a mug filled with hard alcohol that you then fucking down, dude.
Not with it not being mixed with coffee.
Yeah, no, just hard alcohol, mugshot.
The word lost the word of mugshot.
Yeah, no. There's a reason that it's called mugshot.
Oh, okay.
It's because you're consuming that much fucking alcohol.
And you will be getting a mugshot.
So it's in a
later.
mug, and you're also going to be being an ass. So because you're drinking this much.
Okay, no, never heard it. Yeah. But thank you. We'll do mugshots later.
See, I'm educating you as well. It's equally as...
It's fantastic. Yes, a lot of culture. Now, Mr. Norton says that he needs to get a glass of whiskey, right? Unfortunately, the closest spot to grab a drink is at an all-black brothel called the Golden Day. But fearing that Mr. Norton may die from the shock of Trueblood's tale, the narrator drives him to the brothel anyway. The narrator leaves Mr. Norton in the car and rushes inside and says he has to get whiskey out to a white man out front. But the bartender's like, you can't take alcohol outside. Fuck you. And while they're arguing back and forth about this...
Like, cool, he can walk his ass into the bar.
Yeah. And while they're arguing back and forth about this, there's like a group of veterans and a group of patients from the nearby asylum, like yelling and starting fights and shit. And the narrator very obviously does not want to bring Mr. Norton in there. He's like, what if you just pour a shot into my hands? And the bartender's like, no! Like, you're not going to fucking hand feed it to some guy out front.
You're not... Okay, what if I baby bird it?
No, he really just like... He's like, what if I bring him to the door? And he's like, still illegal. No. Like, sir, this is a brothel. Yes, but I'm not about to do something like that.
This is a brothel? I am laying low. Okay?
So the narrator relents, and he and some of the patrons bring Mr. Norton up to one of the prostitutes' rooms. Luckily, one of the veterans at the bar just so happens to be a doctor and a graduate of the very same school that the narrator and Mr. Norton belong to. And while Mr. Norton's being looked over, he's like, oh, that's great, but what are you doing in a place like this? And the veteran's just
What's
like...
anyone doing in a brothel?
Just reading articles? Oh, fuck.
Don't harsh this. Like, come on, man.
Well, he's like, are you fucking kidding me? All the kids up at that college are just as disillusioned as I was when I went there. You can be as smart as you want, but as long as a white society is there to kick you down, you will be kicked down. And Mr. Norton is just like, that's nonsense. Look at this boy here. We're friends. And the veteran's like, you mean the kid you made your fucking driver? He's just another check mark on your social resume to look good. He calls the kid an automaton, basically an old word for a robot.
Yeah, I got it.
It was a big word. I figured, okay, good. On their way back to school, Mr. Norton says nothing to the narrator. He's just pissed the whole time. When they get back to the college...
So I'm going to be mad at you!
This is your fault!
God, I hate being in those situations. Jesus Christ.
Guilty by association.
Like guys being a fucking ass and asking him to like bring alcohol out of a bar and then like, this is your fault if you would have handled this better. Like,
man, do you know that's how I fucking feel anytime I have to go pick up my brother from like a downtown bar. He's so much taller and stronger than me.
Look, man. Like anytime you've had to do that for me, I've apologized.
Of course.
And if I didn't apologize or got aggressive, you put me in my place.
Also, depending on how much either of us has been drinking that night, it's up for grabs as to who's going to force the other one to do what they don't want to do. But when it comes to my brother, dude, it's like, hey, Josh, it's time to go. No, I'm going to stay here. Okay. Like, there's no way I can drag him out. And basically, I have to do damage control from like behind the scenes. I'll talk to the bartender and be like, water down his drink, please. Just get him O'Doul's. I will pay for it.
No. You water that shit down. No, you're just prolonging the inevitable there. Okay.
Yeah.
The goal here, he's going to do whatever he has to do to get to that fucking state. Get there while you still have the energy and while you're still sober enough to deal with it properly. Don't water down the drink.
No. Well, what we end up doing is he basically won't call it a night until we've hit a certain number of bars. Because it's always going to be bar hopping. What I do instead is like to each new bar that I go to, I go straight up to like the bartender or the bouncer, if it's one of those places. And I say like, hey, you see that guy over there? Okay, he's not drunk. That's a total lie. He's not drunk, but he doesn't have situational awareness, and so he's very awkward. If he does something shitty, please let me know and I'll get him out of here, okay? You know,
he's had a stroke.
Makes him
Never mind. No, let me start over.
Makes him throw things and say fuck you a lot.
Actually, you know what, Jordan? Now that I think about it, that's what makes our relationship so fucking dangerous.
What? Good point.
Hang on. No. Because we're both prone to extreme alcoholic-induced debauchery, right?
Oh, yeah.
But both of us also will bring each other out before it gets too nasty. So we're in this very unhealthy way, balancing being arrested or having our lives destroyed while the other one's pulling us out of it, but it's also letting us continue this extremely unhealthy activity and move forward.
Yeah, I usually call it a night when we're like fucking blasting Murder Cycle by Street Cleaner. When it's like, oh, we're having a good night, but it means it's time to go to bed.
That frightened me.
I need to talk about illegal activities.
That was a frightening night.
Now, when the narrator and Mr.
The
Norton...
most frightening part... No. You can edit it out. Fuck you. What's the point? 45 minutes. 45 minutes. We got 17
What's the point of saying it if we have to, like... We're not going to remember it, so then we have to, like, hear ourselves say the point in which we're going to edit out.
Pause it and write it on notes?
No,
do it.
What? What the fuck are you going to say? Let's get on with it.
Well, I'm slightly buzzed, and since you were speaking to me, I have lost my train of thought, so never mind.
All right, good. Now... We're going to discuss Murder Cycle, but don't worry about it. Now,
yeah, that was scary.
When the narrator and Mr. Norton get back to college, Mr. Norton calls on the president of the institute, a black man named Mr. Bledsoe. And I fucking love this guy. When he's around Mr. Norton, he's just very cartoonishly like, well, golly, Mr. Norton, sure sounds like you was in a spot of trouble. Like,
okay, that shit is why I thought we shouldn't do the episode. That there.
It is phonetically like in there like that. I swear to God. But it also plays up to this whole thing of like, because he is trying to make this satirical point that like, you know what? Anyway.
Yeah, no, in the fucking context.
Right. But no. Here's why I love the guy. Not for that. Okay, let me explain myself. When he gets the narrator alone, he's like, you stupid motherfucker, what were you thinking? Like, he is a doctor. Like, he's a very... But
yeah, I get it. Everybody thinks Uncle Ruckus is funny. I'm just saying maybe you as a white dude shouldn't do an impression and then broadcast it, okay?
And the narrator's trying to tell him, like, it's not my fault. He wanted me to take him to those shacks out back. And Dr. Bledsoe has this wonderful quote. He tells the narrator, damn what he wants. We take these white folks where we want them to go. We show them what we want them to see. After that night, Mr. Norton largely avoids the narrator. Days later, Dr. Bledsoe calls the narrator up to his office and tells him that because of the trouble he's caused, he's going to have to earn his last year of college, regardless of the scholarship that gave him a free ride. Dr. Bledsoe's got some trustees up in New York that could use his help. He wants the narrator to deliver these letters to them and see who can use him. Harlem. And oh, the sights of the city. People talking at me. I'll hear words saying. I'm gonna... What's wrong? What? I'm sorry. Come back. So, I already said I'm sorry.
Okay, whatever, man.
So, this southern country bumpkin can't believe his eyes. A black police officer guiding traffic, telling white people where to go. A black guy yelling out of his window at a crowd of people to run the whites out of town. And when two white cops walk by...
I was fine with any other guy doing it.
With the two white cops walk by, they don't give a shit. So as the narrator delivers letter after letter to Dr. Bledsoe's trustees, nothing turns up as far as work for him goes. On his last letter, he takes it to the trustee's office, and the guy he hands it to looks kind of bewildered when he starts reading it and lets the narrator take a look. It's a plea not to give the narrator any kind of work, as he's been expelled from the college and Dr. Bledsoe's just hoping that he gets lost in Harlem somewhere. But this guy letting him read the letter, it's not the trustee but his son, and tells the narrator, no, fuck that, report to the Liberty Paints factory tomorrow. We could use you. The narrator becomes the understudy of a man named Brockway, learning to mix paint and keep the boilers under control. Liberty Paints is well known for making the whitest white anyone's ever seen. But what's interesting...
Oh man, they're going hard.
Again, studied a lot of Russian authors. But what's interesting is when mixing the paint, they start off with this grayish goo. But a few drops of this black formula and you end up with a very vibrant white. What Ralph Ellison is trying to say here is that you don't get people to notice you're white without a few black people in your society to compare yourself to and ultimately try to drown out.
Yeah, because that's how that works. And they'll always keep finding something
exactly
else different. Yeah.
That's the point.
Yeah. Oh, good.
I don't know if you've picked up on this so far, but the one guy that said, you know, just the middle and upper class black guys, and the other guy who said, no, everybody, so long as we act better, he's disagreeing with them pretty hard. Anyway, when the narrator goes to get his lunch in the locker room, he finds that there's a group of workers there holding a union meeting. They notice the narrator and they say, "Hey, who you with?" And he's like, "No one. I'm Brockway's new understudy." And they're like, "Brockway? He's against the union. Hey, everybody, the new guy's a fink." And the narrator runs out of the locker room before he's pummeled.
They beat the shit out of him.
Well, he runs out before they can. Well, back with Brockway, the narrator says, "Jesus, you won't believe what happened. I get to the locker room and there's a union meeting going on." And Brockway's like, "Union? They're out to get me. You're a goddamn fink." And the narrator and Brockway get into a fist fight.
They're not out to get you, buddy. They're out to get what's theirs. Okay, this is very different.
Yeah. Did you ever grow up with that whole thing about how unions are bad? Did you ever hear that from your parents?
You mean, am I un-American?
It's just really strange. I feel like in our generation, I don't think there's going to be too many people out there who are going to say that to their kids. Like, unions, they think that they're all good, but like, and it's like that shit really worked with their parents and any older generation. They were like, unions, ugh, man, you got to pay your dues. And it's like,
it's still there now with a lot of industry, really. I mean, there are bullshit unions. Like I remember there was a union for Safeway where they were only paying you $11.25 an hour, and you were still paying union dues, and it was like, okay, this is a grift.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like this is bullshit.
But like unions are historically the reason why you don't work weekends, unless you're or the reason why you only work 5 days a week. Like the normal things that's like 40 hours a week,
or just
is full-time.
Generally organizing with your coworkers, figuring out what other people are making, and making sure you're not getting fucked hard in the ass. Like
very hard, very raw dogged. Yes, unions are good.
Making it so there's a minimum of sick and vacation time a year, which we've completely lost track of.
Literally anything that's been good in your job, you can pretty much thank a union.
Or just look to any other country that was able to take it further.
I look into the greatest country ever made, actually. Turns out that's here.
Actually, a good place to work a trade job right now is Australia.
Shut up. Stop it. With no one paying attention to the boilers as the narrator and Brockway fight, one of the boilers gets so built up with pressure, it explodes. The narrator wakes up in the library paints factory hospital.
Oh, God, if only there was some regulations.
As they're blowing up, they're just like, ask about your local trade union. The narrator wakes up in the library paints factory hospital, where a few doctors are looking him over, guessing at how best to cure him. They talk of castration before finally setting on electroshock therapy while asking the narrator some questions.
Whoa.
What? Look, at least it's not castration. Like, what do you want?
Okay. Sorry.
And at one point, while he's...
Either castration or I'm going to shock your brain. Whoa.
But here's the thing. At one point, while he's convulsing on the table, one of the doctors says, they really do have rhythm. Right?
Oh, fuck.
Is that rancid?
God damn.
That's fucking horrible. They ask the narrator what his name is, but he doesn't know.
So they take me a second.
They ask him, hold on to that for a second. They ask him some other questions, finely tuned for his race. They ask him, who is Brer Rabbit and who is Brer Bear? And since he can answer these, the doctors deem him good as new and send him out the door with some severance pay.
Thank God it's fiction. That'd be terrible if anything like that ever happened in real life in our country.
He made up this new word called, I think, profilling. I haven't quite nailed it down, but it's in there. I get it, I think. While out and about in Harlem, the narrator sees some movers throwing the belongings of an elderly black couple out into the street. They're being evicted with such force that the movers put a chair out on the sidewalk with the little old lady still sitting in it. A crowd is formed, but everyone's...
Like they just picked up the recliner with her in it, and she was like, no, dude, I'm not.
She's like 70 pounds. What are you going to do? Yeah. What's she going to do, fight you? Well, a crowd is formed, but everyone's...
That's not where I was going with that. I just thought it was comical to have them just like picking literally an old lady in a recliner up and moving around the street.
I mean, I wouldn't have said it. I don't know why you hate women. That's really weird.
54.
A crowd is formed, but everyone's too afraid to stop these guys, although they know what they're doing is wrong. Total bystander effect. But the narrator, angrily, rouses the crowd saying, quote, "Take everything. Take it all. Hide that junk. Put it back where it came from. It's blocking the street and the sidewalk, and that's against the law. We're law-abiding. So clear the streets of the debris. Put it out of sight. Hide it.
Man.
Hide their shame. Hide our shame."
This is the kind of ass I can get behind.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the people start moving the old couple's belongings back inside the apartment and drive the movers off. But when the police show up, the narrator runs away. He stops in an alleyway where this white guy comes up behind him and says, "Hello, I'm Brother Jack. You know, that was a real good speech. Here's my number. I'm with an organization called the Brotherhood that could use a spokesman in the Harlem branch." The narrator quickly jumps on the offer and climbs the ranks within the Brotherhood with his knack for giving speeches. He's given an office, a paper documenting his new alias to go by provided by Brother Jack, and a payment of $60 a week. The Brotherhood advertises the narrator as the man who started that riot in Harlem last week when that old couple was being evicted. But he has a few issues.
Wait, is that literally what it said?
Yeah.
The man who started that riot last week with the old couple. Yeah.
Because basically that's what he knows happens. Actually, in the beginning of the book, the first chapter, he runs into just this white guy, like to prove his invisibility. And the white guy is just like, "Hey, fuck you." And he's just like, "Fuck me, fuck you." And the guy gets scared and he runs off. And he looks in the papers the next day and it says that this guy was almost robbed, you know? So yeah, that's pretty much how it goes though. All that they were doing was...
At least I know you actually read it.
Yeah. But that's the whole thing, is like anything that they do or say is of course going to get twisted around. Actually, historically, Martin Luther King's walks and just anything, any peaceful protesting was, of course, and I know that this is going to sound outlandish, but any peaceful protesting got so sidelined in the news by any violence committed by who knows who. Didn't seem like they were with the protesters, but odd. Anyway.
Yeah.
Although the crowd loves him, the Brotherhood isn't thrilled when the narrator goes off script in his speeches. They really wish he'd use more of the vocabulary words they've given him to use in his speeches. You know, anything that's like togetherness or whatever. Someone also mentions that it's just too bad the narrator isn't at least a little blacker. But the Brotherhood's biggest worry is Raz the Exhorter. Remember that guy that was yelling at a crowd of people from his window when the narrator first got to New York?
I don't know about that guy. His last name is the Exhorter.
Very specific. When your parents give you the middle name you're up to bad shit. Well, that guy that was yelling from his window in the beginning, that was Raz. And instead of being into the idea of solidarity between black and white folk, he is militantly anti-white. And he will fight anyone who's against his ideologies. So much so that at one point, Raz and his supporters get into a street fight with the narrator and members of the Brotherhood. In time, the narrator, or rather his alias, begins to draw popularity. And he's not only sent anonymous threats, but is also under investigation by the Brotherhood itself, worried that he's using them as a platform to further his own political agendas. And so the Brotherhood starts giving the narrator the runaround, you know, not inviting him to meetings, transferring him to like downtown, shit like that. Well, one day the narrator is walking around town, and he sees a member of the Brotherhood named Clifton on the street corner selling little black Sambo marionettes. You know that thing? Sambo?
No.
It's probably for the best. I'll show you later. A bad caricature.
Oh, yeah, I do.
Okay,
yeah.
Good. Think of any caricature from that time period. That's it.
The worst one?
Yeah. Yeah. It's really weird that it's not on a gradient scale either. It's either like respectfully represented or it's that. You know, it's so weird.
Bam! Oh, shit. Okay, that's what we're doing.
Boy, that gas gauge really ain't working. So,
proceed.
So Clifton's on the street corner selling
You just made a Sambo joke. How do you feel?
Is it bad if I don't feel worse? I don't know. So he's selling these marionettes, and hustling is technically illegal regardless of what you're pushing. So these cops come up and start harassing Clifton, and Clifton, in front of a crowd of people, just fucking decks one of the cops. And this cop, I mean, we've all been there, shoots and kills Clifton. but not in a quick draw way or anything. It wasn't like Clifton punched the cop and then a cop's gun just went off. I mean, unfortunately...
Yeah, I was assuming it wasn't like some rad Western ass shit.
No. Unfortunately, we've all seen the footage of what really happens 100 times. And basically, it happened like that. The cop backs up, loads up, takes his time, and shoots Clifton dead. And after watching the paramedics... I'm
scared!
He just kept muttering, stop resisting so many times. Hang on, stop resisting. All right, yep.
I'm in danger in a job I signed up for where I knew I was going to be in danger and have to deal with it, but I don't want to deal with it. Ah! That's what it is.
It is. Yeah, we know. Yeah, if you have access to this podcast, chances are you have been online at some point in your life. You know exactly what we're talking about. And after watching the paramedics come and take Clifton's...
It'd be like if firefighters just had the option to just blow up the whole house.
Man, firefighters... yeah, no one's ever out there like, fuck ambulance drivers. Like, they do their job. Firefighters do just fine.
What a fresh take, Jordan. What a fresh, amazing take.
All right, you know what? Cut that out. Cut that out. After watching the paramedics come and take Clifton's body away, the narrator heads back to the community center where people are asking him, is it true? Is Clifton dead? And the narrator confirms his death. He tells everyone he's going to hold a rally for Clifton in a few days' time, with or without the Brotherhood's approval. Well, a few days later, the crowd gathers, and our narrator gives a speech saying that this isn't a death resulting from possession or dispossession or something. A man is dead because of fucking racism, plain and simple. Quote, he was unarmed, and his death was as senseless as his life was futile. He had struggled for brotherhood on 100 street corners, and he thought it would make him more human. But he died like any dog in a road. The cop? What about him? He was a cop, a good citizen. But this cop had an itching finger and an eager ear for a word that rhymed with trigger. And when Clifton fell, he had found it. The police special spoke its lines, and the rhyme was completed. The community is riled up. But that's not what the Brotherhood wanted. The Brotherhood tells the narrator that they convict him of betrayal to their ways. And he says, fuck you. The community convicts the Brotherhood of betrayal. Things come to a head.
You guys didn't even hold a court. This is bullshit.
It's some weird communist style. Oh. Things come to a head when they say that Harlem has been lost. And the Brotherhood will no longer focus on community matters. But from this point on, we'll focus more on widespread political ones instead. In the following days, Harlem is like a powder keg. Raz the Exhorter, now calling himself Raz the Destroyer, is inciting riots throughout downtown. The narrator is walking through Harlem one night and noting the destruction. His apartment building has been burned down, and he just manages to escape with his briefcase as his sole possession, the one he won from the boxing match.
Yeah.
He comes across Raz, who's on horseback and dressed like a fucking Mad Max character, with a crowd of people behind him. He has a goddamn spear. He calls for the narrator to be lynched, and the narrator runs away. He turns the corner and runs into 2 police officers. At first he thinks maybe he's safe, but of course the cops just start harassing him about what's in his briefcase.
Narrator is still unnamed at this point?
Oh, yeah.
That's like a whole theme. All right.
Yeah, because,
okay.
Get it? Could be any one of us.
Yeah.
So they just interrogate him about what's in his briefcase, obviously looking to rob him. Backpedaling, the narrator falls down an open manhole into an underground coal bin. The 2 men up top joyfully put the manhole cover on and leave him in darkness. The narrator burns a fire fueled by the contents of his briefcase. His diploma, the paper that has all of his alias information on it given to him by Brother Jack, the anonymous letter threatening him. And he notices that the letter and the paper with the aliases on it have the same handwriting, that of Brother Jack. And the narrator realizes the Brotherhood's intentions this whole time has been to cause civil unrest in the black communities to further their own political agenda. Harlem going into a riot is exactly what they wanted, so they could bring it up as a talking point to lobbyists. We end the novel back at the beginning, with the narrator living secretly in the basement of a whites-only tenement building with his 1,000-plus light bulbs. And he feels that after all this time, maybe he's ready to make himself visible again. Quote, being invisible and without substance, a disembodied voice, as it were. What else could I do? What else but try and tell you what was really happening when your eyes were looking through? And it is this which frightens me. Who knows but that, on lower frequencies, I speak for you? Now, the biggest theme to me in Invisible Man are those unmasking your true identity and blindness to others. And they, of course, go hand in hand when you're invisible, but constantly there are descriptions of people getting covered, whether it's a blindfold over your eyes in an underground boxing ring, or wearing sunglasses at night to hide your identity, or getting covered in vibrant white paint when a boiler explodes. The novel has a lot of heavy-handed allusions to the country's blindness of what happens in Black communities and how its citizens get used. But the masking isn't always done literally. Sometimes it's just a character masking their intentions. Back at the narrator's college, Dr. Bledsoe shows him the reality of how far Black people have come, from slavery to having their very own Black-run college, though the money still very much comes from wealthy white people, with an authentic leg restraint from the slavery days. But old as it is, it's been scrubbed clean and looks brand new. It's obvious that Dr. Bledsoe loves owning this artifact and has brought it out several times to show people. He wants to show it off, but he doesn't want to present the ugly history behind what it was really like. In a way, he's glorifying the slave days to say, look how far I've come. On the other hand, when the narrator is talking to a member of the Brotherhood in Harlem, the guy shows the narrator how much he believes in his new life with the organization. Years ago, he escaped a chain gang and traveled all the way up to New York to start fresh. He shows the narrator the old leg irons he was chained to. But unlike Dr. Bledsoe's, these ones are rusted and broken. They're real, and they tell a story. This Brotherhood member gives the narrator the leg irons as a reminder for what they're fighting for. But when the narrator is reflecting on his thoughts in his office with the chains on his desk, a Brotherhood member walks in and is shocked and disgusted by the rusted chains. He tells the narrator to put it away because he doesn't want people to see it and think the Brotherhood is being dramatic with their image. This, of course, reflects on the Brotherhood's intentions as a whole, where they care more about how they're perceived more than their actions. Now, the reception to Invisible Man was huge. Not only was it considered one of the greatest books of the year, releasing alongside titles like The Old Man and the Sea by Ernest Hemingway and John Steinbeck's East of Eden, but as the years went on, it continued to have its praises sung by both critics and fellow authors alike. Barack Obama modeled his 1995 memoirs titled Dreams from My Father off of Ellison's work. And Orville Prescott, the New York Times chief book reviewer for almost 25 years, from 1942 to 1966, said of Invisible Man upon its release, quote, the most impressive work of fiction by any American Negro which I have ever read. He could have probably slightened that down a little bit to just any American, because it is still a fantastic book, but was he trying?
We're going to loosen the rules for this.
Huh. Yeah.
You know.
What Ellison was looking to avoid with Invisible Man was what his contemporaries like Richard Wright and Langston Hughes were doing. Being a Black writer is all well and good, but these guys were basically playing it safe with their stories. They kind of wanted to not just market to their own communities, but to intellectual, literary-minded white people as well, you know? They didn't want to alienate themselves from the Black community, but they also wanted to be accepted among the white ones too. It's kind of ironic to me that these communists were really wanting to be a part of the social elite. Anyway, the point I'm trying to make is that at the time, Richard Wright and Langston Hughes were the Black authors of the day. But the stuff they were putting out just described how Black people were living. And all that anyone would ever get from these stories was, gee, Black people sure are poor, and the ball would never move forward. But what Ralph Ellison was trying to convey was, yeah, we're not just a single mind because we're Black. We're not just a community. We're individuals. We have differing politics and ideas and ideologies. Ralph was basically tired of having the world look at a book and supposedly know what it was about just because it was either written by or for Black people. And you could tell how angry the writing is all throughout the book, too. Ralph Ellison was not pulling any punches. The narrator in Invisible Man holds on to the same ideology as Langston Hughes in the beginning, that black people shouldn't worry about fighting for equal rights. Instead, they should build their own society and their own economy, and then white people will reward them with rights. Like, see, all we had to do was prove to them that we're people. But of course, that wouldn't work, because look at what happened when black people had their own Wall Street. It gave us the fucking Tulsa Massacre. But this was the popular way of thinking at the time. Booker T. Washington, the man who created the Tuskegee Institute where Ellison went to school, pretty much came up with the idea, and after him was Langston Hughes telling people it'd work eventually. Instead, we get the breath of fresh air that is Ralph Ellison, who's like, fuck that, burn it down, burn it all down. Now in their writings, Hughes conveyed his prose like an aristocrat because he wanted to be one. He wanted to be a poet. Ralph just wanted to yell at the world. Remember, Ellison's main influences were people like T.S. Eliot and Ernest Hemingway, who were two very depressing and pissed off writers. But although he had his influences, it doesn't mean that Ralph didn't have his own style. Just like when things are moving fast in your head, his writing style is a bit distorted. Turns out, his main influence to the work was jazz. To Ralph, he didn't really have a quote-unquote community. He felt that the whole of Harlem was stuck in a crab mentality. Do you know what that is?
Yeah. You keep pushing everybody else down, you're getting to the top.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, Ralph didn't even rely on his own family for help when he needed it. He said that people had family, and then you had ancestors. Family you can't choose, but you can choose who influences you. And these to him were his ancestors. He said his ancestors were people like Hemingway, who was still very much alive, by the way, and quite obviously not related to Ralph in any way. Quote, I had been hunting since I was 11, but no one had broken down the process of wing shooting for me. And it was from reading Hemingway that I learned to lead a bird. According to Ralph, it was the stories he'd read that were like family to him, ones that he could choose. But upon the release of Invisible Man, not everyone was super down with what some people felt was an attack on the Harlem community itself. Writer John Oliver Killens stated, quote, the Negro people need Ralph Ellison's Invisible Man like we need a hole in the head or a stab in the back. It is a vicious distortion of Negro life. Remember, at this point, Harlem was fashionable. It was a black community actually doing well. Maybe for the first time ever. And Ralph was challenging all of that. Well, despite his critics, Invisible Man took home the National Book Award the year after its release, in 1953. Ralph Ellison was the first black person to ever receive the award. However, despite that, Ralph felt that Invisible Man was only, quote, an attempt at a major novel. But he was unsatisfied with how it ultimately turned out. However, he was still going to nail it on his next try. Over the course of the next 14 years, Ralph Ellison would pour his heart and soul into over 2,000 pages. In between this time, in 1964, Random House Publishing would release a collection of essays by Ellison called Shadow and Act, which would relaunch Ralph's popularity over 10 years after Invisible Man was released. It served as a reminder that Ralph was still just as pissed off about the state of the world, especially with civil rights being a hot issue, and it reminded the old critics that Invisible Man was still just as relevant as it had been a decade ago, while letting the new critics be aware of how brilliant his work was in the first place. The year after Shadow and Act was released, a poll of 200 critics, authors, and editors was released by Book Week, calling Invisible Man the most important novel since World War II. Unfortunately, sometime in 1967, Ellison's summer home in Plainfield, Massachusetts burned to the ground. Along with it were 300 pages of the over 2,000 that Ralph had been working on for the last 14 years for his second novel. After that crushing blow, Ralph completely abandoned the work. He didn't really mention it after that. Since then, Ralph Ellison would only have one release of short stories in 1986 called Going to the Territory, but that was it. In 1969, Ralph Ellison was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom by from Lyndon B. Johnson, and the next year he was made a Chevalier from the French government, basically their version of knighting someone. I think the reason he was awarded by France is because in the 1950s, existentialism was at its height there, and Invisible Man was for sure an existentialist novel. You know existentialism? It's like nothing.
Yeah.
It's like nothing matters. Fuck you, kind of thing. But a way
I'm somewhat familiar with this practice.
Yeah, we live it. But the way existentialist writers would symbolize a character's struggle is saying they're diseased or sick or something. Like, oh, it's a metaphor for the world being sick. However, in Invisible Man, the main character doesn't have an affliction. It's the whole world that's blind. And I guess that was something that really shook up existentialist genre in France. When Ronald Reagan created the National Medal of Arts in 1984, Ralph Ellison was awarded the very next year. Basically, in between holding lectures all over the world for the remainder of his life, Ralph Ellison was awarded again and again, year after year, for Invisible Man. Ironically, he was awarded the Langston Hughes Award in 1984 as well. In 1975, his hometown of Oklahoma City unveiled the Ralph Waldo Ellison Library. And Ellison Park in Manhattan, near where Ralph spent most of his life, was of course named after him. And in 2014, the U.S. Postal Service released the 91-cent stamp with his face on it. On April 16th, 1994, just 2 days after the 42nd anniversary of his first book's release, Ralph Waldo Ellison passed away from pancreatic cancer at the age of 81 and was later buried at the Trinity Church Cemetery about 15 miles from his home. His wife, Fanny McConnell, followed 10 years later on November 19th, 2005, at the age of 93. Fuck, she was with him for quite a while, actually. Upon his death, it was discovered that Ralph had quite a bit of unpublished content at his home. Remember, he only published 3 books in his lifetime: Invisible Man, Shadow and Act, and Going to the Territory.
Yeah, she was typing away the whole fucking time, though. That's not
well, his first one was, I don't know about her, but probably.
You think it stopped?
It didn't
Stop. No.
2 of those were just short story and essay collections from past years. Since his death, he's released 6 books, among which was his unfinished second novel, cut down from its original length of over 2,000 pages to a whopping 368, and released by Random House Publishing in 1999 under the title Juneteenth. And of course, in its unfinished state, the book received mixed reviews. But here's the thing. This wasn't a total cash grab like Go Set a Watchman was for Harper Lee. No, the literary executor to Ralph Ellison's estate was a good friend of his named John F. Callahan, who I personally think had nothing but the best intentions for the novel. The thing is, all this guy could do was look at this pile of papers and know that this was Juneteenth. This was Ralph's second novel. But Ralph Ellison had just a mess of notes and revisions and different drafts that John F. Callahan knew were supposed to make it up somehow. So he cut out a bunch of unresolved shit that Ralph started but never finished to try and make a story out of it the best he could. Just something that would make sense, which, like, with the promise that there would be a more complete version of the story sometime in the future. Which there was about 10 years later in 2010, again from Random House Publishing under the title 3 Days Before the Shooting, clocking in at over 1,100 pages. People enjoyed this one a bit more than Juneteenth. What John F. Callahan realized while working on the novel, though, was that Ralph Ellison didn't actually know what to do with it. While he professed that, Invisible Man was just okay, he had to deal with the very real fact that it was a huge hit, both critically and financially. When Invisible Man released, Ralph Ellison didn't have to work another day in his life. The royalties just kept coming. So he didn't have any real excuse when it came to not producing another full-length novel. This method...
Other than just taking a fucking rest. Are you fucking...
right.
Like...
Well, and that was the whole thing, too, was he was like... He wanted to be Langston Hughes in terms of, like, when he released The Way of White Folks, he was like, holy shit, this guy's, like... out there, he's like making people mad, and he's actually a black guy making like a living from art. Like, shit, I want that. He was able to do it with one fucking book, but I mean that might be a little bit a bit of a weird, like, I don't know. like that hits you kind of fucking hard where it's like, well, this is my first novel and all of a sudden I'm just the best fucking thing ever. Like I could see how that might be, but you know, for Harper Lee, she just kept at one and just said, well, fuck you. I guess I'll go travel, you know. But this mess of papers he had consisting of his next book was disjointed for a reason. Ralph Ellison had no idea what to do with it. That house fire that made him quit the novel altogether, his answer as to how many pages he lost would change throughout the years. From 300 pages to 500 pages to, just some notes. So I think that this was a big old grace of God. I think to him was just like, holy shit, it's a good thing that the house fire just took my 2 cats and some pages from this novel.
And some pages and some children and my neighbors.
Thank God I'm in the clear. Regardless, Ralph Ellison and the work he did complete are immortalized in Riverside Park. A 15-foot slab of towering bronze at the edge of the park bears a cutout in the shape of a man, thus rendering him invisible.
Wait, where's Riverside Park?
New York.
Huh, all right.
I think. I should have looked at that.
Yeah.
I thought at the time I wrote that down, I was like, oh, Riverside Park. Yeah, New York, of course. Well, either way, the inscription at the base of the statue quotes his novel. I am an invisible man. I am invisible, understand, simply because people refuse to see me. My sources today: Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison, Random House Inc., 2nd Vintage International Edition, March 1995, and Wikipedia. Whew. We did it.
Why am I here? Why am I here right now?
Oh, what?
What do you want me to joke around about here?
You're not here strictly for the jokes. We're here to have a discussion.
Here to have a discussion, my fucking ass. If we were here to have a discussion, there wouldn't be a goddamn script, including only you.
It didn't have to be. Look, hey.
What do you want me to comment on there? It's very...
nothing. This is a learning podcast, first and foremost.
Yeah, fucking fantastic. It's a learning podcast, first and foremost. But at the same time, why the fuck am I here?
Well, don't forget all the jokes you threw out during our Anne Frank episodes. No, but that's... No.
You have done an extremely good job looking up all of that shit and writing it out. It's well presented and structured and a bunch of college words that I don't know. If you have them in your head, then insert them there.
I saw you typing in invisible, and you're like, not seen. What the fuck is seen?
Damn, what the fuck is
oh, you mean I didn't saw it. Oh, got it. No, but it's like, granted, when you look back on our past episodes and everything, it's a bit blank, one could say, as far as any kind of color goes. But
I mean white. Just say white.
Yeah. It's extremely white. And the thing is that going into any black authors, essentially, besides Alexander Dumas, it's essentially like who was allowed to write before fucking 1930. Essentially, like, and the thing is that,
or even allowed to learn how to fucking read, right?
Yeah. And the thing is like the 1930s, not that fucking long ago. Civil rights, fuck that. My dad.
How many people ago?
Dude, my dad was
like
my dad went to a segregated school. The racism is so ingrained in this country that not just in like our own parents' generation have they witnessed segregation or civil rights movement on their own, but like motherfucker, do you think that the people that were against that shit haven't ingrained that into their kids or their grandkids today? Like it is still fucking horrible. And no matter what, when we run into a black author, it's gonna deal with some civil rights issues these days because if we're only covering dead authors,
what the fuck else do they have on their mind?
Yeah.
Like what possibly else would drive them to create art?
Of course.
Yeah.
You know, it's fucking ingrained in the society. And honestly, when I was like first realizing the amount of racism ingrained into American society or just Western culture in general, fucking worldwide culture, as a matter of fact, when I looked at that and I was like, fuck, man, this is going to take a long time to scrub out. I got to tell you, I think it's amazing what we've done in just a couple of generations to scrub out what we can. We're not doing enough. but it's been a good like starting point, I would say, just in terms of like where we've gone to today, calling out the racism, people losing their jobs, people going to jail over shit. That's fantastic. I want to see more of that.
It's good, but that's I kind of feel like that's like the extent of what you can do.
Yeah.
And honestly, what we're doing right now, which is kind of fucking pathetic.
It is. Because you know what? You and I, we're going to look at this shit and we're going to be like, yeah, we're doing a good job, you know? And it's like, you and I have no place to actually teach about any of this. We're not experts on this at all. As a matter of fact, I mean, if anybody wants to step into this episode and email us, calebcan'tread@gmail.com, please let us know. We're here to listen as much as to force you all to listen to us.
Yeah, I mean, we might be stupid, but goddamn, we will look at new information and change our goddamn mind. But
dude, when the whole white privilege thing like first came out, I was so against it because I had been taught. No, I know. I know. I was young, but there were people around. Huh?
How young?
Oh, when that shit came out, I was like 13, 14.
All right.
And people were around me were like, white privilege.
You weren't a whole person yet.
I'm barely a man as it is.
No, you're an adult.
I'm an adult, but I'm a real pussy.
Yeah, but you're an adult. You're just an adult.
But it was like I was taught by people around me that like white privilege doesn't happen to everyone. It's, you know, and it's like, and I was like, yeah, it didn't happen to me. I grew up in a rough neighborhood, you know. Yeah. But it's like we're willing to learn anything, honestly, on the subject. We're going to, I mean, fuck. As it were.
Okay, dude, like growing up like I did, and then moving here in like the 6th grade and then being in the Pacific Northwest as a, you know, I'm fucking half Puerto Rican, but that doesn't mean shit. I'm fucking white. You know, fuck that. The shit that I pulled, the things that I did,
when the encounters
here as a teenager, if I was a black kid, there's no fucking way.
Absolutely.
No fucking way that I would have been able to make it through. Like, I was in situations where I had police officers having me in their car and rough me up and scare the shit out of me, but they were scaring me straight instead of immediately taking me into a facility. And if I wasn't fucking white, dude, I wouldn't even be here
as a fucking teenager living in the suburbs who was getting high and drunk and like cops only stopping me for a fucking what do they call it, curfew, you know? And I'm obviously off my ass.
Wait, they
drunk.
Stopped you for curfew?
Yeah, they said go home.
Shit.
They said go home because I was walking around in the park getting high, you know. And it's like, and I'm there and I'm walking home just like, people think I have white privilege, man. I get stopped by the cops all the time, you know. It's like
the funny thing. Okay, wow, you guys got stopped. No, they just shone the light at us because they were like, I'm not.
Just run. Just go.
And now as a 28-year-old man, I'm like, I know exactly what they're doing. They pulled up and they were like, just shine the light. I don't want to chase. Like, just shine the fucking light.
I'm happy that we've got at least some lazy cops that are just, but you know, man, like that's the whole thing. Like that's why, and I love Ralph Ellison for this reason. He wasn't just setting people straight on the right path of, no, fuck any compromise. You get out there and you get your fucking rights. It's not up to just you. It's everyone as a community, white, black, whoever. You get out there and you fucking get the ball rolling. We need to get this shit done. I loved his anger because I tell you, man, nothing pisses me off more.
Also, the example of it being like, no, you're submitting and then taking a little bit fucking less.
Yeah.
And being like, oh, well, socially, we're not.
Yeah, you're basically taking a compromise and you're like, well, okay.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like, no, fuck that. You know?
Yeah, no, exactly. That's like, I actually... Oh, shit. Well, there goes my phone.
Yeah, it was broken anyway.
I had this conversation with my fucking... with my mom when I was, like, really fucking little. Of...
Good luck.
Why she wouldn't... We got editing. This conversation with my mom as to why she wouldn't accept like a legal partnership or something that wouldn't have the same name as marriage with her wife.
Right? Oh, like her taking her last name?
Or no, just having like the exact same legal benefits of having a marriage.
Oh,
but calling
like
it
a legal partnership,
but calling
that kind of
it
thing.
A different fucking name.
Gotcha.
Right?
Yeah,
and I was just like, Mom, you know, because looking up, it was like, this is causing so many fucking problems in your life. Like, what the fuck? Just.
Oh, I know what you're talking about. Yeah, that was a big thing for a lot of couples. It was like, no, we're not going to take the little like, well, marriage is kind of between people of two different genders.
So to me as a kid, you know, I was asking her, I was like, Mom, why don't we just take the fucking middle ground here? Like, why don't you just have that stance and just like let that go so you can just like have those fucking, you know, same rights? And she was just like, no. If we give them that ground, if we make them think that we're not fucking equal to them, then we're just going downhill from there. And we're going to be fucked. Like, we can't do that.
Yeah, you go from, well, you can't technically marry, but you can have this, to, well, you can't technically have this, but you're allowed to live together.
Well, it's marriage, but not Christian marriage, but it's not, you know what I mean? Like,
honestly, God bless her. Because that's... Fuck, man.
I don't know. Any homest.
Molotov a cop car.